rest of the election. It is true that Governor Walz has a progressive record in his state, but it's also true that when he was in Congress, a little bit ago, he essentially was in a district that has trended towards Trump recently, meaning that the Harris campaign does believe that Walz is going to be able to pull over some of those more moderate voters, those demographics that she really needs to win in November. So, yes, the progressive line of attack is something that you will continue to hear from Republicans, including Donald Trump. They tend to focus on Governor Walz's role after the George Floyd murder. When there were all those protests going on, they said Republicans have criticized Walz for not bringing in the National Guard soon enough. All of that is what you will continue to hear from Donald Trump as they essentially massage these lines of attack that they plan to use the rest of the election.
Yeah, and look, Jay, reaction also from Democrats seems to be overwhelmingly supportive here. Even Joe Manchin chiming in with support as an independent for that ticket, though. What are you hearing from folks on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, you got Joe Manchin, the more moderate side of things, saying that Walz was quote, the real deal. You got praise from AOC, who called it an excellent choice. Point being, that really runs the gamut with Democrats. We've seen widespread support amongst Democrats who are buying into what Selena said is the campaign's pitch and the campaign's reasoning with this pick, which is that Walz will appeal to those necessary Rust Belt swing state voters. But what I'm already hearing from Democrats, Kana, is it also depends upon how the Harris campaign uses him. Do they deploy him in those instances where he can have those organic campaigning moments with Rust Belt voters the way Democrats believe he will add value to this ticket? Obviously, the proof's going to be really in the pudding in November as to what appeal he's able to bring, but that is what's coalescing Democrats around Walz right now. They believe he brings something to the ticket that Harris lacks, that appeal to those Michigan, Wisconsin voters, etc.
All right, Jay, Catherine, and Selena, our thanks to all of you. We are also tracking Tropical Storm Debbie right now. The storm system is pounding the southeast with life-threatening flooding and heavy rain, parts of Georgia, South Carolina. They've already seen up to 14 inches of rain with flood warnings in effect for Savannah and Charleston as well. So in Florida, the cleanup and recovery efforts are underway. This, of course, after Debbie made landfall off the Gulf Coast as a Category 1 hurricane. At least 5 reported deaths are linked to that storm. That does include 2 children. A 13-year-old boy among those killed after a tree fell onto his home there in Levy County. We also, of course, have live team coverage from Savannah, Georgia. ABC News' Ike Ajachi and Samara Theodore live for us both. So, Ike, first of all, what is the latest on the conditions there where you're at right now?
Okay, now we're right here in Savannah, Georgia, right by the Savannah River, and things are essentially starting to get back to normal. The water that's inundated this entire area has since receded back to the river, and people are essentially starting to get back to their normal daily routine. If you remember, there was a curfew instilled in this entire area overnight. That's since been lifted, and people have started to come back out to this area right here, walking along themselves all day. And of course, several people right now, just right next to me, populating the bars and restaurants here. But there is something that I want to tell you. There's still a flash flood warning for Savannah, Georgia, and the surrounding areas until Friday. That's because this place was inundated with 5 to 10 inches of water, and with the rain still coming down intermittently, there are still concerns of flooding in this entire area. I got a chance to drive down through the streets here in Savannah, and we've seen everything from downed trees, from debris sprayed all over the area, and of course, crews working on restoring power. We do know there were tens of thousands of customers from Florida and Georgia who managed to lose power over the effects of Tropical Storm Debbie. Now, this heavy rain and wind, again, is still causing some issues. Officials want residents here to be wary. They're essentially telling people to charge their devices, their phones, their laptops, just in case they need to give an emergency message out to them. They want to make sure people can still get it and heed those warnings that they will essentially tell their residents. Now, if you travel just 30 minutes west of here, you're going to get to an area called Tybee Island. That place is where a lot of officials are concerned. They saw an extra 1 to 2 foot surge, which essentially brings high tide to around 9 feet in that area when you're talking about high tides over the next few high tides. That's going to flood the marshes around Tybee Island and essentially cause a lot of trouble for those residents here. And one more thing I want to tell you, Garden City right here in Georgia, they're telling people essentially to attempt to conserve water by really not trying to do anything unnecessary, like taking any unnecessary showers or using any water. They want to reduce the level in their sanitary sewer system to make sure that essentially doesn't flood or reach past its limit due to the rainfall that's still intermittently falling throughout this area, Kira.
All right, Ike, thank you so much. And so, Samara, let's check in there with you. Where is this storm tracking? What can people expect here in the next hours and days ahead?
Well, you know, we've seen this storm kind of diminish in strength a little bit as it's been over land. But what's happening now is Debbie's getting ready to kind of make its way closer to the coastline and out to sea. And we're going to start to see that structure come together a bit more. The storm really starting to re-strengthen. And as you can see, heavy rain starting to move into the Savannah area where Ike and I are right now. But here's what's going to happen next. So as we move through the evening, showers continue throughout Georgia and South Carolina. By 7 a.m. Wednesday morning, some of the heaviest rain now working its way into places like Charleston, Myrtle Beach. And then you can see by 7 p.m., we're really starting to see North Carolina get in on this. So it's going to be a soaker for places like Raleigh and Wilmington, just north of Myrtle Beach. And then by Thursday, the remnants of Debbie track into the northeast, and we start to get rain in Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, and even as far north as Boston. By the time this is all said and done, Kana, we're talking the potential for up to 25 inches of rain. That is potentially historic flooding for the Carolinas and Georgia.
All right, that is certainly very concerning. Ike Ajachi and Samara Theodore in Savannah, Georgia, thank you so much for being with us. And coming up next here on ABC News Live, fighting across Israel's north escalates as Lebanon says it's trying to prevent Hezbollah from starting a wider war in the region. We have more details straight ahead.
If you were coming of age in the 1980s, the Brat Pack was near the center of your cultural awareness. But for those of us experiencing it from the inside, the Brat Pack was something very different.
I'm really sorry that article had to come out.
I just remember seeing that cover and thinking, oh. So I thought it might be interesting to try and contact everyone who is in the Brat Pack.
You were not interested in talking about the Brat Pack.
I turned everything down.
How come you're talking to me?
Because it was time that we clear the air on a couple of things.
I hated the Brat Pack for decades. What a disaster.
Why did we take it as an offense?
We're afraid we were brats, you know.
Andrew?
I mean, I'm not going to say we were the Beatles or anything.
Well, we didn't fill Shea Stadium. There were moments.
We could have. 1985, I think we could have.
I'd heard my grandmother scream.
The murders of a husband and wife found dead inside their home.
Brandon is the last person to see his parents.
There were wild revelations.
Brandon's secret life.
They were saying he was a murderer, and there was just no possible way.
Brandon was up there. He could have gotten this gun.
Who's wrong? Somebody's wrong.
Now, the powerful prison interview.
Why should we believe you?
2020, Friday night at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Let's go. The ship is incredible. It feels like living in a science fiction movie.
We just saw what no one has seen before.
Wow, look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Well, dead ahead! Tag on!
We are heading into the unknown.
Hammer, hammer, hammer.
It doesn't get any more cutting edge than this.
All right, welcome back. Tensions in the Middle East are expanding as Israeli forces target and kill top Hezbollah and Hamas officials. Hezbollah vowing to respond to the assassination of a senior official killed in Beirut last week. But Lebanon's foreign minister says that the country is working to ensure a wider war doesn't break out. The U.S. already sending more fighter jets and ships to the Middle East in preparation for possible escalation from Iran. The U.S. also blaming an Iranian-backed militia for a rocket attack that injured at least 7 Americans on the Al-Assad air base in Iraq yesterday. This as Hamas is blaming Israel for the assassination of its political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran last week. Hamas releasing a statement earlier today announcing that it's Yahya Sinwar who will replace him as its overall leader now. Sinwar, of course, was in charge of Hamas in Gaza and they say masterminded the October 7th attacks. So joining me for more on this is our ABC News foreign correspondent Tom Soufi-Burge live in Tel Aviv. So look, Tom, first of all, I mean, what are you hearing about this elevation of Sinwar here? I mean, reminding our viewers, he's also known as the Butcher of Khan Yunis. This is a man the IDF has been looking for since that attack on October 7th. They've been clearly unsuccessful in getting him. What does this position mean now for Hamas? And how do you see this impacting Israel and the United States?
Yeah, look, Kana, Yahya Sinwar has a ruthless reputation. He's been a senior figure in Hamas for decades. I mean, I think his appointment signals that Hamas is going to continue to fight. I mean, he will effectively have full control over Hamas's side of the negotiating process in trying to get hostages out of Gaza and a ceasefire in Gaza. It doesn't bode well for those talks because right now, Israel's position and Israel's priority is to kill Yahya Sinwar and really that appointment, rather than a figure in Qatar, you know, one of these exiles of Hamas who's used to dealing with Israel, talking to the West, Yahya Sinwar is not that kind of figure. So it doesn't look good for any kind of ceasefire negotiation. At the moment, though, the talks have stalled.
I mean, I think that's a really interesting assessment there, Tom. Also, look, the IDF showing no signs of stopping its offensive, confirming it killed again yet another Hezbollah leader yesterday. What is the latest now on the fighting as Israel faces threats of retaliation right now, Tom, as you know, on multiple fronts?
Yeah, I mean, the situation up on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, Kana, today has been particularly active. We've seen an Israeli airstrike into southern Lebanon. Lebanese officials saying 5 people were killed in that strike. Hezbollah is reporting that many of its fighters have been killed in fighting and exchanges today. We've also seen a barrage of rockets from Hezbollah into northern Israel. And we've actually seen one failed interception. We saw a rocket or a drone potentially crashing into a highway in northern Israel. And we've seen multiple injuries on the Israeli side.
And also, we know the Pentagon calling the attack on the Al-Assad air base there in Iraq a dangerous escalation in the region. What should we expect there in response from the U.S.?
Well, look, we saw President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris inside the Situation Room with their security team yesterday. Look, at the moment, we know that the U.S. is not ruling out a response. But I think at the moment, given the tension in this region, given the fact that Iran is poised to strike potentially Israel at any moment, potentially Hezbollah is also going to launch an attack. We've seen the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, today basically vowing to strike Israeli targets, threatening to take out valuable targets up in northern Israel. Given that context, I think at the moment President Biden and his team are weighing very carefully, and their priority right now is to try and dial down the temperature, really, you know, weigh in on all players in this region to try and pressure Iran and Hezbollah not to escalate.
And we know from our analysts there is concern that Hezbollah has the capacity to overwhelm that Iron Dome there in Israel. Tom, thank you so much for being with us today, and stay safe. And coming up next here on ABC News Live, Team USA adding to its medal count in Paris, the stunning upset in the men's 1,500-meter race as the U.S. women's soccer team advances to the finals. We have the latest from the Olympic Games straight ahead.
First thing in the morning.
There's a lot going on.
We're still in a flash flood warning.
To catch you up with what happened overnight. Police in riot gear arresting dozens of protesters.
What's happening today? Escalating tensions in the Middle East.
What people are talking about. The migrant crisis.
Fast, straightforward.
With some fun in between.
Check out the Gator on the 17th hole.
The buzzkill in baseball.
First thing in the morning.
America This Morning.
America's #1 early morning news.
On ABC News Live.
Nightline, the stories that shape your world, that shape your life. Dramatic, stunning, empowering, jaw-dropping. The most powerful stories of our time. Nightline, on right after Kimmel and streaming on Hulu.
Tonight, the Democratic presidential nominee and her running mate hit the campaign trail. Plus, the state of emergency tracking the rainfall and flooding. More Americans turn to world news tonight with David Muir, the most watched newscast on television.
Why do so many people start their day here?
From ABC News, this is Start Here.
To be in the know and get a different take on the day's top stories.
A lot of news today, so let's get into it.
Listen now to the Daily News Podcast honored with 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards and see why the New York Times calls it a news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, ABC News. Make it your daily first listen.
Now, that's a part of the story I bet you didn't see coming.
Wherever you get your podcasts, Start Here. What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
We are part of an operation.
Is this our combat operations center?
We're approaching the gate. Militants came in from different directions. Nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag...
Not a tear in it.
How important it made the USA. Great work.
Hi. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Ismail? David.
I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Here's to Good Mornings in America.
Can you feel the love? Oh, yeah.
Mornings that inspire, filled with hope, kindness, joyous surprises, and so much fun.
This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy.
Start your day with Good Morning America's Ray of Sunshine, highlighting the best of America and helping
make dreams come true. Wow. I'm just so happy. It's so good.
Get ready to smile and put the good into your morning, America, because...
You know what will make the morning better? A little ray of sunshine.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families.
On the ground in Ukraine.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Reporting from Joint Base Andrews, I'm Gio Benitez. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
All right, day 11 of the Olympic Games, U.S. women dominate the headlines yet again. American track star Gabby Thomas winning gold in the 200-meter race. U.S. women's soccer team beat Germany to advance to the final match. Meanwhile, for the men, American Cole Hocker taking gold in the men's 1,500-meter. It was a stunning race, bringing the U.S. gold medal count to 24 to now lead all nations in the Olympics. ABC News' Inez de la Catera has more from Paris.
A showdown on the track in the women's 200-meter final between Gabby Thomas and 100-meter champion Julian Alfred. Thomas joining the ranks of Florence Griffith Joyner and Gwen Torrance with a gold medal. She won bronze in the same event 4 years ago. American Cole Hocker just upset the favorites to win gold in the men's 1,500-meter final with an Olympic record time. American Yara Nuguse took the bronze. A nail-biter on the pitch between U.S. women's soccer and Germany. Sophia Smith giving the Americans the go-ahead goal in extra time, defeating Germany 1-0 in a goalkeeping duel. Team USA advancing to the gold medal match Saturday. LeBron James and men's basketball looking to keep their winning streak alive against Brazil in the quarterfinals. In women's gymnastics, Jordan Childs reflected on her bronze medal win in the individual floor exercise. Following her routine, she was in 5th place, but after an inquiry, it was changed. Earlier, she spoke about it with Good Morning America.
Honestly, I'm going through a lot of feelings. I'm still on a high from last night, but also just, trying to get every moment in with my family, friends.
Simone Biles earned silver in the event.
And Kana, in surfing, Caroline Marks won the gold medal after conditions in Tahiti caused a delay. It's the second time the U.S. has won a gold medal in that sport. Carissa Moore won it 4 years ago in Tokyo. Kana?
All right, Inez, thank you so much. And thank you for streaming with us. I'm Kana Whitworth. Follow ABC News Live on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and more. And coming up at 7 p.m. Eastern, be sure to catch ABC News Live Prime with Linsey Davis for the day's biggest stories and the impact that they have on you. The news never stops. You can find us anywhere you stream live news. And if you're on the go, we're on the ABC News app and abcnews.com. There's more news straight ahead.
There was a specific moment during our wedding. I looked at Jason and I realized this was real. This was our family.
This is her knight in shining armor.
Everything felt right. All of a sudden, I found this hidden folder. I opened it and I don't think I can say it. I'm sorry.
She put her hand to her mouth and gasped.
Jason would kill me before he would let me tell anyone this part of him. He's in so much freaking trouble.
I remember just feeling like, what the hell? That was my dad. What is going on?
That's when that fire inside of me shifted to like a flame. I was like, it's on.
Betrayal is one of the hardest types of trauma to overcome.
He didn't think I had it in me to do something. So I did.
Betrayal, a father's secret. The all-new season, only on Hulu.
Whenever, wherever news breaks, it's so important to always remember that lives are changed. Here in London, in Buffalo, Uvalde, Texas,
Edinburgh, Scotland, from Poland once again tonight. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw.
Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? We're heading to a small community outside of Mexico City. Splintered houses and splintered lives. The magnitude of the devastation.
You're streaming ABC News Live. Reporting from Rolling Fork, Mississippi.
Santa Fe, New Mexico. Raleigh, North Carolina.
The U.S. Capitol.
Mayfield, Kentucky. Minneapolis.
Mexico. Tongass National Forest, Alaska.
Getting you behind the stories as they happen. Giving you a front row seat to our world as it plays out in real time, live. ABC News Live Prime. We'll take you there.
Stream ABC News Live weeknights, America's most honored streaming news program, only on ABC News Live. Streaming free right now wherever you stream your news.
It's lunchtime in America, so what are we serving up?
Well, how about everything you need to know?
Give it to me. Your health, your money, breaking news, pop culture, with the biggest stars, music, trends, and of course, good food.
It's all coming up on GMA3.
You're going to love it. We'll see you then.
GMA3, what you need to know. A third hour of GMA in the afternoon.
So join us afternoons
for everything you need to know.
I love that.
Me too.
They call him the beauty queen killer. He's targeting young women in malls.
I am single. I want to enjoy the company of a member of women.
He tortured me.
How did she survive 9 days of terror?
The word accomplice came up.
Nobody knows the real story.
The Beauty Queen Killer, only on Hulu. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
She has a big heart.
Taking you live now to Temple University there in Philadelphia, where Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro and at one point VP candidate is addressing the crowd here at the campaign Walz kickoff. So let's go ahead and listen in.
Whether in a courtroom, whether fighting as Attorney General, whether remembering the people who have oftentimes been left behind when she was sitting in the halls of power in the Senate, Kamala Harris has always understood that you got to be every day for the people, for the people. And she has served with honesty. She has served with dignity. And every step of the way, she's broken barriers to serve all of us. Now, Philly, hear me on this. That's a hell of a stark contrast from the guy running on the other side. Oh, y'all know who I'm talking about, I guess. You see, we remember here in Philly what it was like when Donald Trump was our president. We remember when he was president, it was more chaos, fewer jobs, and less freedom. You see, Philly, I know y'all, we walk around with a little bit of a chip on our shoulder because we remember, right? And we remember that it was Donald Trump that ripped away the freedom of millions of American women to make decisions over their own bodies. We remember that. We remember that. We're not going back. We are not going back. You're right. Not going back. And here's the thing. We don't want to go back, but let's go back for a second. Just remember. Let's just remember, because I think there's some folks out there that still have a little bit of brain fog, having a hard time remembering what it was like. Now listen, he brought all that chaos and limited our freedoms back when he was president, and let's be honest, didn't know what the hell he was doing. He didn't. But this is serious, gang. He knows what he's doing now. He does. And the Supreme Court that he packed, the Supreme Court that he has packed has ruled that he is above the law. He is outside of the law. And now he's got a clear plan. They all wrote it down in that whole Project 2025 thing. And they got a clear plan to take away more of our freedoms. They got a clear plan to use the Justice Department to go against our enemies. They got a clear plan to isolate us in the world. And let me tell you something, I ain't going back. I am not going back. I'm not. And neither do you want to go back. We are not going back. We're not going back. No. We're not. And not only are we not going back, we're not going into the future with Donald Trump, not going in the future with him. A guy who has made clear, he's told us what he wants to do, more chaos, less freedom. And yo, friends, it was Maya Angelou who said it, when they tell you who they are, yeah, I believe them, and I don't want to see that. And Donald Trump, well, he's now got a partner with him. Y'all see that guy? Yeah. J.D. Vance, he's not exactly off to a good start. I think we can all agree on that. But I think part of the reason why he's not off to a good start is this, and it's serious. He doesn't know who he is. And he's not being honest with himself, so he can't be honest with the American people. He can't. Now, so if I hear you right, and I think I do, you're chanting, he's a weirdo. Which means, man, I love you, Philly. Which means, if you're chanting, he's a weirdo, then you heard of my good friend and our next vice president, Tim Walz. Because Tim Walz, in his beautiful Midwestern plain-spoken way, he summed up J.D. Vance the best. He's a weirdo. And I want to talk about Tim Walz, because Philly, in a minute, he's going to come out here, and I want you to give him a whole lot of love. Tim Walz is a great man. Tim Walz is an outstanding governor. Tim Walz is a teacher. Tim Walz is a guardsman. Tim Walz is a great patriot. He is. And I'll tell you what else. Tim Walz is a dear friend. And I want you to know Lori and I feel blessed to have Tim and Gwen in our lives. They are outstanding public servants, and I can't wait for you, Philly, the rest of this Commonwealth, and our entire country to get the chance to know the Walzes, the next Vice President and Second Lady of this nation. Now, I think it is fitting, and it is special, that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have chosen to launch their campaign right here in Philadelphia, in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. And importantly, they chose to launch their campaign right here in the birthplace of real freedom. You know, the other side, Trump and his sycophants, let me tell you something. They love to talk a good game about freedom, right? They love to cloak themselves in the blanket of freedom all the time. They love to talk a good game. But hear me on this. It's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. That's not freedom. It's not. It's not. It's not freedom to say you can go to work, but you can't join a union. That's not freedom. It's not freedom to tell women what they're allowed to do with their bodies. That's not freedom. It's not. It's not. It is not. No, it's not. It is not. And it won't be that way when Kamala Harris is our president. And it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he's going to pick the winner. That is not freedom. That's not what patriots have fought for over the years. It is not. You know what we are for? You know what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are for? They are for real freedom. They are. The kind of real freedom that comes when we look that young girl in North Philly in the eye and we invest in her public school because we believe in her. We believe in real freedom, the kind of freedom that comes when we invest in our police and we invest in our communities because we believe that young girl should walk to and from school safely and back to her mama at the end of the night. We believe in real freedom where the young girl can grow up and be whatever she wants. She can be a welder. She can go to college. She can be who she is. That is real freedom, and that is what we are fighting for. We believe in the kind of real freedom where she grows up in a community where she can breathe clean air and drink clean water and know that she will leave an environment to the next generation that is great for her kids and her grandkids. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz believe in a real freedom where you can marry who you love and be who you are. Now, freedom is on the ballot. And our fundamental freedoms are at risk. And I know when it's at risk, it's easy to feel uneasy. And it's easy to get down. But let me tell you something, Philly. Let me tell you something, Pennsylvania. Let me tell you something, America. I am more optimistic than ever before. And the reason I'm more optimistic than ever before is because of all of you. And because of what a band of patriots started here in our taverns and our town squares and at Independence Hall just a couple miles from here nearly 2.5 centuries ago. You see, they came together. They came together to declare our independence from a king, and we're not going back to a king. And we're not going back. And when they declared that independence from a king, they came together and they said, we are going to form a union. And over the last 248 years, the reason why I'm optimistic, the reason why I'm hopeful, is because as we've written this American story over the last 2.5 centuries, it's been ordinary Americans taking up the baton from those patriots and saying, we're going to do extraordinary things. Octavius Catto understood that responsibility. Cecil B. Moore understood that responsibility. Gen Z, when they're organized and on TikTok, understand that responsibility. And I'm optimistic today because the task of perfecting our union, the task of defending our fundamental freedoms, it now falls to all of you. To freedom-loving Americans all across this great country, and to the good people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who will decide this next election and understand our unique responsibility. I love you too, and this is a moment where we all have to understand that while we'll see Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's names on the ballot, that this election isn't just about their names on this ballot. This election is about all of you. And whether or not you're willing to do this hard work to fight for our freedom, whether or not you're willing to do this hard work that started here 248 years ago. I want to just say this. I lean on my family and I lean on my faith, which calls me to serve. And I am proud of my faith. Now hear me. I'm not here to preach at y'all, but I want to tell you what my faith teaches me. My faith teaches me that no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. That means that each of us has a responsibility to get off the sidelines, to get in the game, and to do our part. Are you ready to do your part? Are you ready to form a more perfect union? Are you ready to build an America where no matter what you look like, where you come from, who you love or who you pray to, that this will be a place for you? And are you ready to look the next President of the United States in the eye and say, hello, Madam President? I am too, so let's get to work.
All right, you just heard from a very fired-up Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro there as he's kicking off the Harris-Walz campaign rally. He was among the finalists and by many analysts was the favorite for a Harris running mate, more moderate than Tim Walz, but many wondered about his own political ambitions. Would being her vice president be best for him? I want to bring in ABC News chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl, and I preface that, John, because we have some really interesting reporting here from our political team about what happened in the aftermath of the meeting that Shapiro had with Vice President Harris.
Yeah, you know, there had been an expectation. If we had been talking 3 or 4 days ago, I think much of the political world, many Democrats thought that Josh Shapiro was the leading candidate to be picked as Kamala Harris's running mate. They had their meeting over the weekend as Harris met also with Tim Walz, also spoke with Senator Kelly, and according to several sources, tell ABC News that Shapiro left that meeting feeling that it didn't go as well as it could have, and that he subsequently, over the weekend on Sunday, called over to the Harris campaign and suggested that he had reservations about coming on the ticket as her running mate. Really, reservations not so much about joining the ticket, but reservations about leaving his job as the governor of Pennsylvania. You know, this is fascinating reporting. He's not saying he refused an offer. It seemed as if, in a way, he saw that an offer wasn't going to be coming based on the fact that the meeting didn't go so well, and effectively took himself out of the running.
Yeah, I mean, I find that very, very fascinating. Again, he had reservations about leaving his job as governor, as you pointed out, and that was the first thing he said when he walked out on that stage. He said, "I love being your governor." In terms of Tim Walz, though, John, look, we're going to hear from him momentarily, and we're getting excerpts from these speeches, and they already on this ticket are leaning into rural America, trying to use him to align there with rural America, something that is clearly in defiance of what we hear from the GOP, coining this ticket as dangerously liberal.
You know, by the way, before I address that, Selena Wang had a very interesting bit of reporting on the vetting process with Walz, that apparently he said that he had never spoken from a teleprompter before. He's a guy that speaks impromptu in his speeches. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes. I assume that this will be on teleprompter. But yes, he is a guy that was chosen in part because of his deep connection with rural America. Somebody that was born in a rural farming community in Nebraska. 24 people in his graduating class from high school. Somebody who volunteered for the Army National Guard. And somebody who was a teacher, a high school teacher, taught high school geography. And when he ultimately got into politics, got elected to Congress, he represented one of the most rural districts in the state of Minnesota. A very, by the way, conservative district, a district that Donald Trump won twice, in 2016 and in 2020. But one of the reasons, and you hear several reasons given by the Kamala Harris team for choosing him, is he does have that connection with rural America. You know, the Republican critics call Kamala Harris a San Francisco liberal. Well, you cannot say that Tim Walz is San Francisco anything. He is a guy very much from the heartland, not a coastal elite. His politics may be very similar to the politics of Kamala Harris, but stylistically and in terms of his background, he is somebody who is very different, and in that way balances out this ticket.
Certainly, in some of these experts, it sounds like Vice President Harris will refer to herself as a daughter of Oakland, California, and will refer to him as Coach Walz. So we'll be watching that playing out in real time there, John. But John, I'm also curious about, you know, some of this polling that we're seeing. We're hearing from our friends at 538, and there's some other polls as well, an ABC News Ipsos poll that says nearly 9 in 10 U.S. adults didn't know enough to even have an opinion about Walz. And so, John, the assessment from 538 here is, well, now either campaign can really define him as they see fit.
Yeah, I mean, this is both the risk and the opportunity for the Harris campaign. Walz is well known, obviously, in Minnesota. He's well known in that, in his former congressional district. He's well known by his former students. He was the defensive coordinator for the high school football team in 1999 that won the state football championship. So he's got a base of support within the state of Minnesota, but nobody in the rest of the country really knows who he is. So you're going to see very quickly an effort by Republicans, you're already seeing it, to define him as an out-of-touch, left-wing, ultra-progressive governor. They'll try to say that he is somebody who, during the racial unrest that we saw following the murder of George Floyd, failed to act to quell the riots in Minneapolis. They will portray him as a radical on economic policy, on environmental policy. That's how they're going to try to define him. And the Harris campaign has a chance to define him by leaning into his biography as somebody who served his country 24 years in the U.S. military, somebody who was a high school teacher, had a deep connection with his students, somebody who understands rural America, understands some of the very types of voters that have moved from voting for Barack Obama to voting for Donald Trump. So, but it's going to be an all-out sprint to define who Governor Tim Walz is.
And as we heard Governor Shapiro there say, he's also the one that coined this term weirdo that we're sort of seeing go viral in this descriptive language now towards the Trump-Vance ticket. But one thing I think that's also interesting is we're seeing this Democratic Party appear in this moment, John, to be pretty united over this choice and over this ticket. I think even hearing from Joe Manchin specifically as an independent now sort of really indicates some of that.
I mean, it's fascinating to see the so-called squad, the kind of far-left progressives in the House, people like Ilhan Omar from Minnesota. You have AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, also endorsing this pick. But also, as you pointed out, Joe Manchin, who is so conservative within the context of the Democratic Party that he left the Democratic Party, now considers himself an independent. And he's been pushing his party to move more towards the center. He says that's the key to winning a national election. Well, here you have it. He's now pointing to Tim Walz and saying this was a brilliant pick. His statement was quite laudatory in saying that Kamala Harris made the right decision in appointing him. So somebody who has united the Bernie Sanders wing of the party and the Joe Manchin wing of the party, at least for now, they're all entirely on board with this pick.
But as you mentioned, uniting this far left, the so-called squad of this party, is something that the GOP is pouncing on immediately. Yes. We heard J.D. Vance also there today talk about how this really indicates that Vice President Harris is bending her knee to the progressive left wing of her party. That's something that they see as hugely negative, and will sort of get that ball rolling even further now.
Yeah, so the question is, how effectively will they be able to do that, given who Tim Walz is as a person, his biography, the fact that he is very much a product of rural America. He is somebody who represented a rural and a rather conservative constituency in Congress and managed to get reelected. He served in Congress for 6 terms. It was a seat that when he first won it had been controlled by the Republicans. They're going to try to portray him as a far-left progressive. The campaign is going to answer back and say, no, look at who he is, look at who the man is, and look at who has supported him in the state of Minnesota. But this is why it's both an opportunity and a risk. It's all about defining who Tim Walz is. Is he the high school coach, Army National Guardsman, who is a product of farm country, or is he an ultra-progressive governor who failed to act to quell riots in 2020? Both campaigns are going to be making their case.
And look, we know that swing states clearly matter here. They are crucial. So are these rural areas in these swing states. And so it's interesting to me, John, when we look at some of the analysis again here from 538, they consider Walz a strong candidate, but note, only really in Minnesota. He's outperformed a generic Democrat, right? But essentially, he'll help in Minnesota, but might not help as much as they thought he might in places like Wisconsin.
And by the way, you'll have to check me on this, but I believe the last time the Democrats managed to lose the state of Minnesota was 1972. So Democrats, if there were, they shouldn't need help winning Minnesota, although Trump has been gaining some ground there. But this is a state that has been solidly Democratic in terms of national elections. So he was not chosen because he was going to help Kamala Harris win Minnesota. He was chosen because he is somebody who can try to help balance out the ticket and appeal not necessarily to Minnesota voters, but to voters in the Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. That's where Kamala Harris needs help. And right now, in all of those states, Tim Walz is an entirely unknown quantity, but they will want to get him out there campaigning heavily, as they're about to do right now in Philadelphia.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like that. And noting that Democrats won Wisconsin by some 20,000 votes in the last election, I think there'll be a lot of questions if they lose Pennsylvania in this next election, right? And stick with me here, John. They're not quite on stage yet, but what kind of microscope do you think Democrats might be under here if they do lose Pennsylvania, knowing that Governor Shapiro was right there?
Look, here they are coming out. And Tim Walz is getting an enthusiastic welcome, but you heard the welcome that Shapiro had. Governor Shapiro is an incredibly popular figure in the state of Minnesota. His approval rating well over 60%. And if Kamala Harris ultimately ends up losing Pennsylvania, there will be a lot of second guessing of this pick. So we'll see how Tim Walz is received by a crowd that has now been warmed up, by the way, as we just saw, by Josh Shapiro.
Yeah, a very fiery warm-up there from Josh Shapiro, who called him also my good friend Tim Walz. He called him beautiful, plain-spoken, and he commented on his Midwestern way. And so we'll have to see if that's something that we hear in this speech tonight. Again, reminding our viewers as well that Selena Wang has reporting that really he's never spoken from a teleprompter before. And look at this crowd. This is a packed house there at Temple University, and this is the moment in which he was really introducing himself to the American people. Again, noting here from an Ipsos ABC News poll that nearly 9 in 10 U.S. adults didn't really know enough about him to have an opinion. So let's go ahead and listen in.
So let me say, on behalf of myself and the first, second gentleman of the United States, my husband, Doug Emhoff, thank you for the warm welcome. It's good to be here with all of the friends, all of the leaders who are here. I want to thank former Governor Ed Rendell, Senator Bob Casey, who we will re-elect this November, Senator John Fetterman, Mayor Sherelle Parker, and Chairman Jamie Harrison. And it is so good to be here with your incredible Governor, Josh Shapiro. And I will say, Josh is a dear, dear friend and an extraordinary leader. He and I have been spending a lot of time together over the years. And I told Josh, look, I am so invested in our friendship in doing this together, because together with Josh Shapiro, we will win Pennsylvania. We will win Pennsylvania. And I thank you, Josh. I thank you. So Philadelphia, I launched my campaign for the President of the United States a mere 2 weeks ago. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind. And just last night, the delegates to the Democratic National Convention finished voting. And so I stand before you today to proudly announce I am now officially the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And so now we got some work to do. We need to move to the general election and win that. And to all the friends, listen, we also need to level set. We are the underdogs in this race. But we have the momentum, and I know exactly what we are up against. Now, many of you know, before I was elected vice president or elected a United States senator, I was an elected attorney general, and before that, elected district attorney. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. So in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who scammed consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, Trump's type. So, but let me just say, hold on. This campaign, our campaign, is not just a fight against Donald Trump. Our campaign, this campaign, is a fight for the future. It's a fight for the future. In Pennsylvania, we fight for a future with affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable child care, paid leave. We fight for a future future where we build a broad-based economy, where every American has the opportunity to own a home, to start a business, and to build wealth. We fight for a future where we bring down prices that are still too high and lower the cost of living for America's families. So that they have a chance not just to get by, but to get ahead. We fight for a future where we defend our most fundamental freedoms. The freedom to vote. The freedom to be safe from gun violence. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. And the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body, not having her government tell her what to do. So, I love you too. So here's the thing. Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. A leader who will help unite our nation and move us forward. A fighter for the middle class. A patriot who believes, as I do, in the extraordinary promise of America. A promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not just for some, but for all. So, Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader. Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota. To those who know him best, Tim is more than a governor. To his wife, Gwen, he is a husband. To his kids, Hope and Gus, he is a dad. To his fellow veterans, he is Sergeant Major Walz. To the people of southern Minnesota, for 12 years, he was congressman. To his former high school students, he was Mr. Walz. And to his former high school football players, he was Coach. And in 91 days, the nation will know Coach Walz by another name, Vice President of the United States. America, for some folks, they're just getting to know Coach Walz's story. And I'll tell you, he is the proud product of a middle-class family in rural Nebraska. He is a veteran who served our nation in uniform for more than 2 decades as a member of the Army National Guard, and he went to college on the GI Bill. He is someone who, long before he entered politics, worked as a teacher. When Coach Walz and his wife Gwen moved from his native Nebraska to Minnesota nearly 30 years ago, they both took jobs at the local high school. Coach Walz taught social studies, Gwen taught English. After school, Tim was the linebackers coach for the football team. Where I've heard the stories about he had a knack for using the game of football to teach life lessons. He saw the potential in kids who sometimes didn't even see it in themselves. Under those Friday night lights, Coach Walz motivated his players to believe they could achieve anything. And together, they defied the odds, hear this out, going from a winless record to the school's first ever state championship. And I'll say and I'll add, Tim wasn't only a role model on the football field. Around that same time, Coach Walz was approached by a student in his social studies class. The young man was one of the first openly gay students at the school and was hoping to start a gay-straight alliance. At a time when acceptance was difficult to find for LGBTQ students, Tim knew the signal that it would send to have a football coach get involved. So he signed up to be the group's faculty advisor. And as students have said, he made this school a safe place for everybody. In the high school yearbook, the students voted Coach Walz the, quote, most inspiring faculty member. And as I think everyone here can see, Tim Walz was the kind of teacher and mentor that every child in America dreams of having, and that every kid deserves. The kind of coach, because he's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be. And that's the kind of vice president America deserves. So it was Coach Walz's students who actually helped him decide to run for office. And he served 12 years in Congress, representing a purple district as he reached across the aisle to get things done. He was the highest ranking enlisted man to ever serve in the United States Congress. And the top Democrat on the Veterans Committee. And he was known as one of Capitol Hill's best marksmen, winning a bipartisan sharpshooting contest year after year. In Washington, Tim worked to raise the minimum wage, to protect the freedom of workers to join a union, and he cast one of the critical votes to pass the Affordable Care Act. Which, of course, gave health insurance to tens of millions of Americans. I'm going to tell you, when we win, Tim and I will continue to make the Affordable Care Act even stronger. We will win. We're dealing with on the other side. So on that last topic, if Donald Trump gets the chance, he will end the Affordable Care Act and take us back to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was like? Children with asthma, breast cancer survivors, grandparents with diabetes. Well, Governor Walz and I will not let that happen. Because we believe health care should be a right and not just a privilege for those who can afford it. As governor, Tim has continued to fight for working families. He secured paid leave for workers in Minnesota. And he refused, as governor, to allow any student in their public schools to go hungry. Free for every child. And Tim Walz and I, we agree about many things, including when our middle class is strong, America is strong. And strengthening the middle class will be my defining goal as I am President of the United States. So Pennsylvania, ours is a fight for the future of the middle class, and it is a fight for freedom. In this moment, we are witnessing a full-on attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. Take reproductive freedom. Now think about this. Donald Trump said he wants to punish women. And as a result of his actions, today in America, 1 out of 3 women live in a state with a Trump abortion ban. 1 out of 3. Some of these bans go back to the 1800s. Even before before women had a right to vote. Think about that. Well, Tim and I have a message for Trump and others who want to turn back the clock on our fundamental freedoms. We're not going back. So let me say about Tim Walz, he has shown up to stand against these attacks long before he stood on the stage with me. After Roe was overturned, he was the first governor in the country to sign a new law that enshrined reproductive freedom as a fundamental right. Tim Walz by my side when I am President of the United States and we win majorities in the United States Congress, we will pass a bill to restore reproductive freedom, and I will proudly sign it into law. Tim Walz has also defended the sacred freedom to vote. As governor, he signed the most significant expansion of voting rights in Minnesota in over 50 years. And with Governor Walz's help, when I am president, we are going to finally pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We're going to get it done. So Tim is a hunter and a gun owner who believes, as the majority of gun owners do, that we need reasonable gun safety laws in America. So as governor, he expanded background checks and increased penalties for illegal firearm sales. And together, when we win in November, we are finally going to pass universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban. Through his work, Tim, the way I think about it, he really does shine a light on a brighter future that we can build together. In his state, he has been a model chief executive, and with his experience, I'm telling you, Tim Walz will be ready on day one. In fact, when you compare his resume shall we, to Trump's running mate, well, some might say it's like a matchup between the varsity team and the JV squad. So, Pennsylvania, ultimately in this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? A country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate. And here's the beauty of our democracy. We each have the power to answer that question. We each have the power to answer that question. The power is with the people. We love our country, and I believe it is the highest form of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. That is how we preserve the promise of America. And after all, you know, the promise of America is what makes it possible for two middle-class kids, one a daughter of Oakland, California, who was raised by a working mother, the other, a son of the Nebraska plains who grew up working on a farm. It's the promise of America, because only in America is it possible for them together to make it all the way to the White House. And so Coach Walz and I may hail from different corners of our great country, but our values are the same. And we both believe in lifting people up, not knocking them down. He and I, we both know the vast majority of people in our country have so much more in common than what separates them. When we look at folks, we see in our fellow Americans neighbors, not enemies. Not enemies. And so my promise to you is this. Our campaign will reach out to everyone, from red states to blue states, from the heartland to the coast, in rural, urban, suburban, and tribal communities. We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans. And when elected, we will govern on behalf of all Americans. And so, with Tim Walz by my side, and with all of you at our side, let us fight for the promise of our future. And with that, I ask Pennsylvania, are you ready to make your voices heard? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. And now, welcome the next Vice President of the United States, Tim Walz.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you and Doug, this incredible journey. And Pennsylvania, I know you know this, but my God, what a treasure you have in Josh Shapiro. Holy hell, can this guy bring the fire? He can bring the fire. This is a visionary leader. Also, I have to tell you, everybody in America knows when you need a bridge fixed, call that guy. And I think sometimes we forget, and you see people a little one-dimensional, but seeing a guy who cares so deeply about his family, a man with compassion, vision, and I'll have to tell you this, I know this from experience, there is no one you would rather go to a Springsteen concert in Jersey with than him, than that guy. Brooks. And I can't wait for all of you and America to get to know my incredible wife, Gwen, a 29-year public school educator. Don't ever underestimate teachers. And our two beautiful kids, Hope and Gus. I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket and to help Vice President Harris become what we all know is very, very good for us to think about. Next President of the United States of America. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, Attorney General of the great state of California, a United States Senator, and Vice President of the United States. Vice President Harris has fought on the side of the American people. She took on the predators, she took on the fraudsters, she took down the transnational gangs, she stood up against powerful corporate interests, and she never hesitated to reach across the aisle if it meant improving people's lives. And I want all of you to hold this, and don't ever underestimate the power of this. She does it all with a sense of joy. I know a little something about that commitment to people. I was born in West Point, Nebraska. I lived in Butte, a small town of 400, where community was a way of life. Growing up, I spent the summers working on the family farm. My mom and dad taught us, show generosity towards your neighbors and work for a common good. My dad served in the Army during the Korean War. And with his encouragement, at 17, I joined the Army National Guard. For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation. The National Guard gave me purpose. It gave me the strength of a shared commitment to something greater than ourselves. And just as it did for my dad and millions of others, the GI Bill gave me a shot at a college education. My dad was a teacher. My brothers and sisters and I followed in their footsteps. 3 out of 4 of us married teachers. What we do. For nearly 20 years, I had the privilege of teaching high school social studies and coaching football. Including winning that state championship. Thank you. Don't ever close the yearbook. Don't ever. But it was my students. They encouraged me to run for office. They saw in me what I was hoping to instill in them, a commitment of common good, a belief that one person can make a difference. So in 2006, I took a leap and I ran for Congress. And because high school teachers are super optimistic, I was running in a district that had 1 Democrat since 1892. Well, my neighbors graced me with an opportunity to represent them in the United States House of Representatives. I'm proud of the work we did there together. I worked across the aisle on veterans issues, on agriculture, and on ways to grow rural economies. I learned the art of compromise without compromising my values. And now, as governor of the great state of Minnesota, I bring those experiences to bear in tackling the challenges that are facing our great state. Minnesota's strength comes from our values, our commitment to working together, to seeing past our differences, to always being willing to lend a helping hand. Those are the same values I learned on the family farm and tried to instill in my students. I took it to Congress and to the state capitol, and now Vice President Harris and I are running to take those very values to the White House. First of all, he doesn't know the first thing about service. He doesn't have time for it because he's too busy serving himself. Again and again and again, Trump weakens our economy to strengthen his own hand. He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division. And that's to say nothing of his record as president. He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed. You know, some of us are, some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. These guys are after my heart chanting, mind your own damn business. That feels good, so thank you. Look, that includes IVF, and this gets personal for me and my family. When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own health care decisions. And for our children to be free to go to school without worrying they'll be shot dead in their classrooms. By the way, as you heard, I was one of the best shots in Congress, but in Minnesota, we believe in the Second Amendment, but we also believe in common sense gun violence laws. Vice President Harris' idea of freedom is a ticket for education to be that ticket to the middle class, not crippling debt. Air that's clean, water that's pure, communities that are safe. A place where we settle our political differences not through violence, but with our votes. And that's what this election's about. What direction will this country go in? He's not going back. Well, Donald Trump would damn sure take us backwards. Let's be clear about that. And don't believe him when he plays dumb. He knows exactly what Project 2025 will do to restrict our freedoms. To rig the economy to help the super rich. If Trump gets a chance to return, he's going to pick up exactly where he left off 4 years ago. Only this time, it will be much, much worse. Raising costs on middle-class family. He will repeal the Affordable Care Act, no doubt about it. He'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And when somebody tells you are, they believe him. He said he'd ban abortion across this country, and he'll do it, whether or not Congress is there or not. Donald Trump's not fighting for you or your family. He never sat at that kitchen table like the one I grew up at, wondering how we were going to pay the bills. He sat at his country club up in Mar-a-Lago, wondering how he can cut taxes for his rich friends. And I got to tell you, his running mate shares his dangerous and backward agenda for this country. J.D. Vance literally wrote the foreword for the architect of the Project 2025 agenda. Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, J.D. studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on! That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So, you see what I did there? look. I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see. So you know what's out there, so say it with me. We aren't going back. We aren't going back. We are not going back. So we got 91 days. My God, that's easy. We'll sleep when we're dead. Over those next 91 days and every day in the White House, I'll have Vice President Harris's back. Every single day. And we'll have yours. You know how this works. We can't do it alone. We need you, each and every one of you. Go over to KamalaHarris.com, get on board, because we need you. Freedom to make our own choices. This leader, this compassionate, careful, joyous leader believes in each and every one of you. My God, you came here tonight to sit at the very top because you love this country and you're not going back. She believes in the opportunity for every single person to join the middle class. She believes in the promise of America. We just got to fight. We just got to fight. Because as soon-to-be President Harris says, when we fight, we win. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Vice President. God bless America.
He has introduced himself to the nation there. You just heard from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He is now the official vice presidential nominee, joining Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee officially at the top of that Democratic ticket. The delegates have spoken, and there you are seeing their significant others as well. Tim Walz noting that his wife has been a teacher for 29 years. He talked a lot about his own experience there as a football coach. Certainly has the ability to command a room, and you saw that they're playing out for the very first time. This is their first campaign stop. They have several more to go, really targeting these crucial swing states. I want to bring in ABC News' Jay O'Brien for a little bit of reaction on this. And Jay, we've been discussing here how his nomination here really has brought together the Democratic Party. We're seeing a lot of unity within the party in this moment, but as far as Americans go, he's relatively unknown till now, Jay.
He is, and that's an opportunity, and it's also an issue. Josh Shapiro is more well-known, so there are people who have their minds made up about him one way or the other. He's popular in Pennsylvania. He was obviously the other name on the short list. When it comes to Walz, the fact that there are voters in swing states who don't know him appears to be something that the Harris campaign is frankly gambling on, in that they can introduce him, they believe, to those voters in those key Rust Belt swing states like Michigan, like Wisconsin, and say to those voters, he has your values. He comes from where you came from, and therefore you should really look at voting for this ticket. And Wisconsin, Michigan, those are must-win states for the Harris campaign. It's worth pointing out here, Kana, that as you watch those images of Tim Walz as he was getting off the stage, you get the sense that he is not this practiced politician. He's waving with both hands. He's hugging the vice president. He's kind of jostling her as he hugs her. He's being himself, which is something that I think the Harris campaign has somewhat indicated they want. They want him to be himself. And it's even noted in what they've said about him getting ready here, which is they've told our Selena Wang, for instance, in his vetting it came out that he very rarely, if ever, uses a teleprompter. So he had to practice. That this is not necessarily something he's fully practiced for, being this kind of professional campaigner. And it looks like that's something the Harris campaign is going to lean into.
Right. Is he the man that can speak to middle America, to rural America, or is he this far leftist politician as painted by the GOP? I want to bring in Republican strategist and former Vivek Ramaswamy administration official Tricia McLaughlin. Tricia, thank you for being here with us. You know, a couple of things that we heard there in his speech. He went on to attack Trump as saying he doesn't know service, that he would weaken the economy to strengthen his own hand. And he said that Trump froze in the face of the COVID crisis, and he also went on to talk about how he would ban abortion nationwide. We know that Trump has not endorsed a nationwide abortion ban, but what is your take here on what you just heard from Tim Walz?
Well, I thought there was a remarkable candidate on stage tonight, and he was passed up by the Democrat machine for Kamala Harris, and he was passed up by Kamala Harris for vice president. I think the Democrats and Kamala Harris really squandered the opportunity to have Josh Shapiro. I've actually never heard him speak for that length before, and he's pretty remarkable. We know that for the Harris ticket, all roads electorally lead to Pennsylvania, and even if Josh Shapiro could have helped them marginally, that would have been very helpful to that ticket. That being said, with Walz, I think that Democrats and the media want to lean into that. He has this folksy way, but as somebody who is from and lives in Ohio, which is the heartland, I found some of what he said to be insulting. Him saying, oh, you couldn't, J.D. Vance went to Yale, almost saying that you can't be from the Midwest and pursue, elite education, or that he was in high finance, that couldn't be possible. Actually, J.D. Vance really did live the American dream, so I thought it was quite rich when they were trying to compare the two records. J.D. Vance was a combat veteran, and Walz, we appreciate all service, but he didn't see that, and there's actually questions about his record in his military service.
And we also know that J.D. Vance was also there in Pennsylvania today, and he went on to talk about Josh Shapiro, as she noted, and then he said that no, Kamala Harris didn't choose him. She went for the most alienating choice because that is who she is, and this is how she wants to govern. I want to bring in former DHS official in the Biden administration, Marcia Espinoza, for her reaction on this. So, Marcia, some analysts say, is this perhaps her first mistake that she's made in campaigning, or is this going to be a major win? I mean, certainly November will tell, but I'm curious on your take.
This is a major win as her first choice, and someone who knows what it takes to be the vice president, right? Just a few weeks ago, she was the vice president nominee. So she's made her decision. I think it was great. You can just feel the energy from watching that speech. I was just grinning from ear to ear. I mean, Tim Walz says that they're really bringing the joy back to this campaign. That was really felt today. He just has a plain way of speaking. He's a great communicator. He's going to be an attack dog for this campaign. And most importantly, he's going to compliment her on everything that she wants to accomplish, especially on national security issues.
And as we've heard time and time again, the number one rule of a vice president is to do no harm. And so you are seeing the crowd react in a massive way there at Temple University in Philadelphia today. And as you heard Tim Walz discuss, as Marcia mentioned, the joy that he feels Vice President Kamala Harris has brought back into this campaign. He talked about his service in the National Guard. He said it reinforced his shared commitment to this country, and then talked about how the GI Bill allowed him to go to college, and then he followed in his parents' footsteps, as did his wife. They all became teachers, dedicating their lives to the next generation, and he was a football coach as well. He said he learned the art of compromise without compromising his values. Our thanks to all of our analysts, Jay, Tricia, and Marcia, for being with us today, and thank you for streaming with us. I'm Kana Whitworth, and coming up after a quick break, be sure to catch ABC News Live Prime with Linsey Davis for the day's biggest stories and the impact that they have on you. The news never stops, neither do we. Keep it right here on ABC News Live.
It was a regular day for 19-year-old Melissa Witt.
Something terrible had happened to her.
We had several suspects.
All these kinds of leads.
A known serial killer in your area. Could he be involved?
We're actually finding key evidence that could have slipped through the cracks.
Her last hours on this earth were horrific.
This beautiful young girl. Police will find out what happened.
At Wit's End, The Hunt for a Killer, only on Hulu. With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World